The nanny cam in the corner of the grand foyer captured everything in perfect high-definition clarity. The rage in Natasha Volkov's eyes, the calculated pause before she struck, and the horrifying moment when Isabella Carver's pregnant body tumbled down 23 marble steps like a broken doll. What the camera didn't capture was the sound. Isabella's scream cut short by the impact, the sickening crack of bone against stone, or Natasha's whispered words as she stood at the top of the staircase, watching the woman who had everything she wanted lying motionless in a pool of blood. Accident, Natasha practiced, her Russian accent carefully modulated to sound appropriately distraught. Terrible, tragique accident. She smoothed her designer dress, checked her reflection in the mirror at the top of the stairs, and began her descent, slowly, carefully, as if rushing to help rather than confirm a kill. Isabella Carver lay twisted at the bottom of the grand staircase, her silk maternity gown soaked crimson, her right arm bent at an unnatural angle. At 7 months pregnant, she had been radiant just moments before, glowing with the kind of happiness that comes from finally having everything you've ever wanted. A loving husband, a beautiful home, a baby on the way, and now she was dying while her husband's mistress knelt beside her, already rehearsing the story that would make her a widow's comfort instead of a murderer. But hidden 3 floors above, behind the innocent facade of a teddy bear's button eye, a digital witness was recording every frame of Natasha Volkov's performance. The same security system that tech billionaire Marcus Carver had installed to protect his family was about to become the instrument of his mistress's destruction. If anyone ever thought to look, Isabella's eyes fluttered open just as Natasha reached her, consciousness returning in fractured moments of pain and terror. She tried to speak, tried to move, tried to protect the baby growing inside her, but her body was no longer responding to her commands. "Chill," Natasha whispered, her voice loud enough to carry to any household staff who might be listening, but soft enough to sound gentle rather than threatening. "Don't move, Isabella. You fell down the stairs. It was terrible. Help is coming." But Isabella could see the truth in Natasha's pale blue eyes. Cold satisfaction, masked as concern, triumph disguised as tragedy. "My baby," Isabella managed to whisper, her hand moving instinctively to her stomach. "I'm so sorry," Natasha replied, and for the first time, her voice carried genuine emotion. Not remorse, but relief. "I'm so very sorry." Above them, the nanny cam continued recording as footsteps echoed through the mansion. Marcus returning from his business meeting, household staff responding to the commotion, emergency services summoned by a hysterical mistress who had discovered her lover's wife after a tragic fall. Within 20 minutes, the mansion was swarming with paramedics, police officers, and investigators who saw exactly what Natasha intended them to see: a grieving husband, a traumatized witness, and a woman whose pregnancy had made her unsteady on feet that had betrayed her at the worst possible moment. The official report would read, accidental death due to fall-related injuries. The insurance company would pay out Marcus's $20 million policy on his wife's life. And Natasha Volkov would finally have everything she had killed for: Marcus, his fortune, and a clear path to the altar unburdened by an inconvenient wife or heir. But as the coroner's van pulled away from the mansion and the police completed their routine investigation, none of them noticed the small, innocuous device mounted in the corner of the foyer. A device that had been purchased by a man paranoid about kidnapping threats. A device that recorded everything, stored everything, and uploaded everything to a secure cloud server that would preserve Isabella Carver's murder in perfect detail. A device that Natasha Volkov had forgotten existed. 24 hours later, as Natasha sat in Marcus's study helping him plan Isabella's funeral, she had no idea that her crime was archived in digital clarity, waiting for someone to find it. She had no idea that Marcus Carver was not the only person with access to the mansion security system. And she had no idea that Isabella's younger sister, Catherine, was about to request the nanny cam footage from the day Isabella died. Not because she suspected murder, but because she wanted one last video of Isabella alive and happy, walking through the home she had loved. In 18 hours, Catherine Chun would see something that would change everything. In 18 hours, Natasha Volkov's perfect crime would begin to unravel. In 18 hours, a dead woman would reach from beyond the grave to destroy the monster who had stolen her life. But for now, Natasha sat in Isabella's chair at Isabella's desk, planning Isabella's funeral while wearing Isabella's engagement ring, a ring Marcus had asked her to wear to help him feel connected to his wife's memory. She thought she had won everything. She had no idea that her victory was about to become her execution. If you think this story is about one evil woman getting away with murder, you're wrong. If you think this ends with a simple discovery and a quick arrest, you're wrong. What Catherine Shin finds on that nanny cam will expose not just a murder, but a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of wealth and power. A conspiracy that Isabella Carver died trying to expose. Stay close. Keep watching. Because the woman who thought she had committed the perfect crime is about to learn what happens when technology meets justice. Isabella Chun had always been the sister who saved everyone else. Growing up in San Francisco's Richmond district, she was the one who mediated fights between their parents, who tutored Catherine through calculus, who worked 3 jobs to help pay for their mother's cancer treatments. Even her name, Isabella, meaning devoted to God, reflected the selfless nature that defined her entire life. She had met Marcus Carver at a charity gala for pediatric cancer research, an event she was attending not as a guest, but as a volunteer coordinator. Isabella worked for a nonprofit that provided support services to families dealing with childhood illness, a calling that had emerged from watching her mother's battle with cancer when Isabella was 16. Marcus had been immediately captivated by her authenticity in a room full of people performing wealth and philanthropy for social credit. While other women at the gala competed for his attention with designer gowns and calculated charm, Isabella wore a simple black dress from Target and spoke passionately about the real impact of childhood cancer on families who couldn't afford treatment. "You're not like the others," Marcus had told her during their first dance. "Thank God," Isabella had replied with a quick smile that made him fall in love on the spot. Their courtship had been a fairy tale that Catherine had watched unfold with a mixture of joy and protective concern. Marcus showered Isabella with gifts, trips, experiences she had never imagined possible. But more importantly, he listened to her ideas about expanding charitable giving, about using his technology fortune to create real change rather than just tax write-offs. Within a year, they were engaged. Within 18 months, they were married in a ceremony that made the society pages and cost more than Catherine's annual salary. Isabella had been blissfully, radiantly happy, which was why Catherine knew, with absolute certainty, that her sister had not simply fallen down a staircase. Catherine Chun was everything her older sister was not. Skeptical where Isabella was trusting, pragmatic where Isabella was idealistic, suspicious where Isabella was accepting. As a forensic accountant for the San Francisco District Attorney's Office, Catherine spent her days following money trails that exposed corruption, fraud, and financial crimes. She had developed a professional paranoia about coincidences and a personal intolerance for people who used wealth to escape consequences, which was why she had never fully trusted Marcus Carver. Not because he wasn't charming. Marcus could sell sand to a desert nomad. Not because he didn't love Isabella. Catherine had seen genuine devotion in his eyes during their wedding ceremony. But because Marcus Carver was a man who collected beautiful things, and Catherine had always feared that he might view her sister as another acquisition rather than a partner. Her fears had crystallized 6 months ago when Isabella called her, crying, from the bathroom of the Carver mansion. "I found something," Isabella had whispered into the phone. "Financial documents that Marcus tried to hide. Catherine, I think he's been stealing from the charitable foundation we set up. Millions of dollars that were supposed to help sick children." Catherine had driven to the mansion that night, but by the time she arrived, Isabella had changed her tune. "I was mistaken," Isabella said, her demeanor completely different. "I misunderstood the financial structures. Everything is legitimate." But Catherine had noticed the fresh bruise on Isabella's wrist, carefully concealed by a designer bracelet. She had noticed the way Isabella avoided eye contact, the way she kept checking the time as if expecting Marcus to return. And she had noticed how quickly Isabella changed the subject when Catherine tried to discuss what she had discovered. "Isabella," Catherine had said carefully, "if something is wrong, if you're in danger, you can tell me. You could trust me." "Nothing is wrong," Isabella had replied with a smile that didn't. "Reach your eyes. I'm just pregnant and hormonal and seeing problems where none exist." That was the last honest conversation Catherine would ever have with her sister. Natasha Volkov's story began in Moscow, in a communal apartment where 8 families shared 2 bathrooms, and survival was measured by how well you could manipulate the people around you. Her mother had been a seamstress who dreamed of designing for Russian aristocracy that no longer existed. Her father had been absent, a common enough story in post-Soviet Russia, where economic desperation made men disappear like smoke. Natasha had learned early that beauty was currency, charm was survival, and the only way out of poverty was through the bedroom of someone wealthy enough to lift you above your circumstances. She had immigrated to the United States at 19 with a tourist visa and a plan to never leave. Within 6 months, she had married a 70-year-old real estate developer who died conveniently 2 years later, leaving her with a green card and enough money to reinvent herself completely. The pattern repeated: older men, strategic relationships, timely deaths, or divorces that left her incrementally wealthier and more sophisticated. By the time she met Marcus Carver at a tech conference in Silicon Valley, she had transformed herself into exactly the kind of woman who could attract a billionaire. Beautiful, but not too beautiful. Men like Marcus preferred women who enhanced their image without overshadowing them. Intelligent, but not threatening. She could discuss his business interests without challenging his authority. Foreign, but assimilated. Exotic enough to be interesting, familiar enough to be comfortable. Most importantly, she was available, unencumbered by children, family obligations, or moral restrictions that might interfere with her primary objective. Marcus Carver represented the ultimate prize: young enough to be virile, wealthy enough to be transformative, and just arrogant enough to believe he could control any woman who entered his life. The affair had been systematic, calculated, and ultimately successful. Within 3 months, Marcus was spending more time with Natasha than with his wife. Within 6 months, he was discussing divorce. The only obstacle to Natasha's complete victory was Isabella's pregnancy. Marcus might divorce a wife, but he would never abandon his child. And as long as Isabella carried his heir, she would retain a claim to his fortune, his attention, and his loyalty that no mistress could overcome. The solution had been elegant in its simplicity. Eliminate the wife. Eliminate the child. Comfort the grieving widower. Become a new Mrs. Marcus Carver with complete control over his emotional and financial life. The murder had been perfectly planned and flawlessly executed, except for one detail that Natasha's meticulous research had missed. Marcus Carver was not the man either woman thought he was. To Isabella, he was a loving husband whose only flaw was an obsession with security that bordered on paranoia. She attributed his extensive surveillance system, his background checks on household staff, his insistence on knowing her whereabouts at all times, to the legitimate concerns of someone whose wealth made him a target. She had no idea that Marcus's paranoia was actually guilt, the defensive behavior of a man who knew he had made enemies and was constantly waiting for retribution. To Natasha, Marcus was a brilliant but emotionally vulnerable tech mogul who could be manipulated through careful applications of seduction, sympathy, and strategic withdrawal. She saw his wealth, his influence, his need for control, and believed she could redirect all of it toward herself. She had no idea that Marcus had been playing a longer game than she was. The truth was that Marcus Carver had built his fortune through theft, corporate espionage, and the systematic destruction of anyone who threatened his empire. The charitable foundation that Isabella had discovered irregularities in was just the tip of an iceberg. That included money laundering, tax evasion, and financial fraud spanning 2 decades. Isabella's pregnancy had represented more than an inconvenient heir to Natasha. It had represented a security risk to Marcus. Because Isabella, with her background in nonprofit management and her increasing access to his financial records, was beginning to uncover evidence that could destroy him. Marcus had been planning to eliminate his wife himself. Natasha had simply gotten there first, solving a problem he had been struggling to address while providing him with a perfect alibi. The grieving widower whose pregnant wife had died in a tragic accident. It would have been the perfect crime, if not for the nanny cam that Marcus himself had installed. The nanny cam that was about to reveal not just a murder, but a conspiracy that ran deeper than anyone imagined. The nanny cam that Catherine Shun was about to access in her quest to find one last video of her beloved sister. Catherine sat in her apartment that night, staring at an email from the mansion security company that had just confirmed her access to the archived footage from Isabella's final day. She wasn't looking for evidence of murder. She was looking for memories. A glimpse of Isabella laughing in the kitchen where she loved to cook. A moment of her sister walking through the gardens she had planted. Anything that would help Catherine process the devastating loss of the person who had been her anchor, her protector, her best friend since childhood. She had no idea that what she was about to find would transform her grief into a weapon that would destroy everyone who had contributed to Isabella's death. But as Catherine clicked on the folder labeled Foyer Camera, Day of Incident, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in her apartment. Something about the mansion's official story had never felt right. Something about Marcus's grief had seemed performed rather than genuine. Something about the woman who had been conveniently present to witness Isabella's accident had triggered Catherine's professional instincts about people who profited from tragedy. Isabella, Catherine whispered to her laptop screen as the video began to load. If you're trying to tell me something, I'm listening. She pressed play, and her world exploded. The timestamp read 3:47 p.m. on the day Isabella died. Catherine watched her sister descend the grand staircase of the Carver mansion, one hand trailing along the mahogany banister, the other resting protectively on her rounded belly. Isabella looked radiant in a flowing cream-colored maternity dress, her dark hair catching the afternoon light streaming through the mansion's cathedral windows. She was humming. Catherine could see her lips moving in the gentle rhythm of a lullaby, probably the same song their mother had sung to them as children. Isabella was already nurturing the daughter she would never hold. Catherine pressed her fingers against her laptop screen, desperate to somehow reach through the digital barrier and warn her sister of what was coming. Because standing at the top of the staircase, just out of Isabella's view, was Natasha Volkov. The mistress waited with predatory patience, her body coiled like a spring as Isabella reached the halfway point of her descent. Then, with deliberate calculation, Natasha stepped into view. Isabella. Natasha's voice carried clearly through the security system's audio. I need to speak with you. Isabella turned, surprise flickering across her features. Natasha? What are you doing here? Marcus is in meetings until... This is not about Marcus. Natasha moved closer, her heels clicking against the marble with mechanical precision. This is about you. About your interference in things that do not concern you. Catherine felt her blood turn to ice. This was not a chance encounter. This was not an argument that escalated unexpectedly. This was an execution. Isabella took a step backward down the stairs, instinctively creating distance as she recognized the danger in Natasha's tone. I don't know what you're talking about. The foundation audits, Natasha said, continuing her advance. The financial records you have been reviewing. The questions you have been asking about offshore accounts and shell companies. Isabella's face went pale. How do you know about? I know because Marcus tells me everything. Did you think your little investigation would remain secret? Did you think you could threaten his business empire without consequences? Catherine watched her sister back down another step, her hand gripping the banister for support. I wasn't threatening anything. I just wanted to understand why money meant for sick children was being diverted. Yes, we know what you discovered. Natasha reached the top of the staircase where Isabella had been standing moments before. Unfortunately, Isabella, some discoveries cannot be permitted to continue. That was when Catherine saw the moment that would haunt her forever. Isabella's eyes widened with a terrible understanding of someone realizing they had walked into their own murder. She opened her mouth to scream, to plead, to somehow negotiate her way out of the trap that was closing around her. But Natasha was already moving. The push was swift, brutal, and utterly unambiguous. 2 hands against Isabella's chest, delivering force calculated to send a pregnant woman tumbling down 23 marble steps with enough violence to ensure she would never survive the impact. Isabella's scream cut through the mansion's silence as her body twisted in the air, her hands reaching desperately for anything that might break her fall. But there was nothing except empty space and unforgiving stone. Catherine watched her sister die. She watched Natasha stand at the top of the staircase for exactly 17 seconds, observing the results of her work with clinical detachment. She watched the moment when Natasha transformed herself from killer to witness, arranging her expression into shocked horror before beginning her careful descent to discover the accident. The video continued for another 8 minutes. Natasha kneeling beside Isabella's body, checking for a pulse she knew wouldn't exist, then calling for help with a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Catherine slammed her laptop closed, rushed to her bathroom, and vomited, until nothing remained but bile and rage. When Catherine finally stopped shaking enough to think clearly, her first instinct was to call 911. Her second instinct was to call the San Francisco Police Department. Her third instinct, the one she followed, was to call the one person she trusted to handle evidence that could bring down someone with Marcus Carver's wealth and connections. Detective James Morrison had been Catherine's colleague for 3 years before he transferred from white-collar crime to homicide. They had worked a dozen cases together, tracking financial conspiracies that led to murder, following money trails that exposed corruption reaching into the highest levels of government and business. More importantly, James Morrison was one of the few cops Catherine knew who couldn't be bought, intimidated, or convinced to look the other way when powerful people committed crimes. He answered on the second ring, his voice carrying the weariness of someone who had seen too much evil disguised as respectability. "Morrison, James, it's Catherine Shun. I need you to come to my apartment immediately, and I need you to come alone." The change in his tone was immediate. Catherine never called James at 11 o'clock at night, unless someone was dead or about to be. "What happened?" "My sister was murdered. I have video evidence. And the person who killed her is about to inherit a billion-dollar empire unless we stop her." Silence stretched across the phone line as James processed what she was telling him. "Catherine, your sister died in an accident. I read the report. Pregnancy-related fall. No signs of foul play. James, I have footage of someone pushing Isabella down the stairs. High-definition video that shows premeditation, motive, and execution. This wasn't an accident. It was a calculated murder staged to look like an accident." Another pause. Catherine could practically hear James calculating the implications, not just for the case, but for his career, his safety, his ability to pursue justice against someone with unlimited resources to fight back. "Are you absolutely certain about what you saw?" "I'm absolutely certain that if you don't help me, a murderer is going to get away with killing my sister and stealing her husband's fortune. And I'm absolutely certain that Marcus Carver knows more about this than he's admitting. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Catherine spent those 20 minutes making copies of the video file, uploading it to secure cloud servers, and creating backup evidence that would be impossible to destroy or suppress. By the time James arrived at her door, she had built a digital fortress around Isabella's murder that could withstand any legal or financial assault. But she wasn't prepared for how James Morrison would look at her when she opened the door. 3 years of professional collaboration had made Catherine familiar with James's reputation, his methods, his commitment to justice that sometimes crossed ethical lines to achieve moral ones. What she had never noticed was the way his eyes lingered on her face when he thought she wasn't looking. The way he stayed late at the office when she was working complex cases, ostensibly reviewing files, but actually ensuring she had backup if dangerous people felt threatened by her investigations. The way he looked at her now, not just as a colleague seeking help, but as a woman he cared about who was walking into a situation that could get her killed. "Catherine," James said as he entered her apartment, his presence immediately making the space feel smaller and safer simultaneously. "Before you show me whatever evidence you found, I need you to understand something." "What?" "Marcus Carver is not just wealthy. He's connected to people who make problems disappear. If we pursue this, if we expose his wife's murder, we're not just challenging one man. We're challenging a network of powerful individuals who profit from his activities." Catherine looked at James, really looked at him, and realized that somewhere during their years of working together, her professional respect had evolved into something more personal. Something that made her notice the silver threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that spoke of late nights pursuing justice, the strength in his hands as he set his coffee cup on her table. "Are you trying to talk me out of seeking justice for my sister?" "I'm trying to make sure you understand the cost before you pay it." Catherine moved to her laptop, her decision already made. The cost of not seeking justice is higher. Isabella died trying to expose financial crimes that are probably funding other criminal activities. Her baby died because someone wanted to eliminate an heir who might have inherited Marcus's empire and eventually discovered his corruption. She opened a video file and turned the screen toward James. The cost of letting Natasha Volkov get away with murder is that she'll kill again, because predators like her don't stop unless they're stopped. James moved closer to view the screen, close enough that Catherine could smell his cologne, could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could see the moment when his professional detachment transformed into personal outrage. Jesus Christ, he whispered as he watched Natasha push Isabella down the stairs. This is cold-blooded execution, and it's being covered up by people who have the resources to make this video disappear, to make me disappear, to make anyone who threatens their operation disappear. James turned to face her, his expression serious in a way that made Catherine's pulse quicken. Catherine, if we pursue this case, I can't protect you. Marcus Carver has connections in law enforcement, in the judiciary, in federal agencies. He could have you killed and make it look like a robbery, an accident, a suicide. Then you understand why I need someone I trust to help me build a case that can't be buried. They stood there for a moment, the laptop screen casting blue light across their faces as the video continued playing, evidence of a crime that would either bring justice or get them both killed. There's something else, James said quietly. Something you should know before we go any further. What? I've been investigating Marcus Carver for 18 months. Financial crimes, money laundering, connections to organized crime. Isabella's death shut down my investigation because my primary witness was gone and the department classified it as accidental death. Catherine stared at him. You knew my sister was in danger. I knew Marcus was dangerous. I didn't know how dangerous until it was too late. The admission hung between them like a confession. Catherine, I should have protected her. I should have warned her. I should have moved faster on the investigation. Catherine saw the guilt in his eyes, the professional regret that had evolved into something more personal. And she understood, suddenly, why James had always stayed late when she worked dangerous cases. Why he had always been available when she needed backup. Why he was looking at her now like a man who couldn't bear to lose someone else he cared about. James, she said softly, help me finish what Isabella started. Help me stop the people who killed her. And maybe we can save each other in the process. He looked at her for a long moment, and Catherine saw the exact moment when Detective James Morrison stopped being just a colleague and became something much more dangerous. A partner, an ally, and possibly the man she would either fall in love with or die beside in the pursuit of justice for her sister. All right, he said finally, but we do this right. We build a case that can't be challenged, evidence that can't be suppressed, and backup plans that ensure we survive long enough to see Natasha Volkov in prison. Catherine felt something shift inside her chest. Hope mixed with fear, determination strengthened by partnership, and the beginning of something that felt like love forged in the crucible of shared danger. Where do we start? James smiled, the first genuine smile Catherine had seen from him in months. We start by proving that Marcus Carver knew exactly what his mistress was planning. And then we take down the entire corrupt empire that Isabella died trying to expose. As they began planning the investigation that would either bring justice or get them killed, Catherine felt her sister's presence like a whisper in the room. Fight for me, Isabella seemed to say. Asterisk fight for the truth. Fight for the future our daughter will never see. Asterisk Catherine looked at James, this man who was risking everything to help her pursue justice, and made a promise that would define everything that came next. I'm going to destroy everyone who contributed to Isabella's death. And I'm going to do it using the evidence she died trying to gather. Then let's get to work, James replied. The war for Isabella's memory was about to begin. The investigation that would destroy Marcus Carver's empire began in Catherine's kitchen at midnight, with coffee, conspiracy boards, and the kind of methodical evidence gathering that had made her the DA's office's most successful forensic accountant. But it nearly ended 3 days later when James Morrison was found unconscious in his apartment, a victim of what paramedics initially classified as carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty furnace that had been deliberately sabotaged. This is what happens when you investigate billionaires, James said from his hospital bed, his voice hoarse, but his eyes burning with determination that matched Catherine's. They don't just fight back, they eliminate threats. Catherine had spent 18 hours at his bedside, watching monitors that tracked his recovery while her laptop displayed financial records that painted an increasingly horrifying picture of Marcus Carver's criminal empire. The charitable foundation Isabella had discovered irregularities and was just the surface layer. Beneath, it was a network of shell companies, offshore accounts, and money laundering operations that had funneled over $2 billion through fake humanitarian projects over the past decade. Children's hospitals that existed only on paper. Cancer research facilities that were actually cryptocurrency mining operations. Educational foundations that were nothing more than tax shelters for wealthy individuals who wanted to appear philanthropic while avoiding federal oversight. Isabella had died because she had stumbled onto evidence that Marcus Carver had stolen charity money meant for dying children. But the deeper Catherine dug, the more she realized that Marcus himself might be just another layer in a conspiracy that reached far beyond one tech billionaire's greed. The breakthrough came when James was released from the hospital and they decided to take their investigation directly to the source. "We need to get inside the mansion," Catherine said as they sat in James's car outside the Carver estate, watching through surveillance equipment he had borrowed from the police department. "The nanny cam footage proves Natasha murdered Isabella, but we need Marcus's financial records to prove motive and conspiracy. Breaking and entering the home of a billionaire who just tried to kill me is not exactly standard investigative procedure," James replied, though his tone suggested he was already planning how to do it. "Nothing about this case is standard. Marcus has too many connections to pursue this through normal channels. Every time we file official reports, they disappear. Every time we request warrants, they get denied. Every time we try to involve federal authorities, we get transferred to dead ends." Catherine was right, and James knew it. 3 days of attempting legitimate investigation had resulted in nothing but bureaucratic stonewalling and escalating threats against their lives. "There's another option," James said quietly. "We could take the nanny cam footage directly to the media. CNN, 60 Minutes, someone with national reach who could expose Natasha's crime in a way that makes it impossible to suppress. And watch Marcus's lawyers claim the footage is fake, that we're disgruntled investigators with grudges, that Isabella's death was a tragic accident being exploited by conspiracy theorists." Catherine shook her head. "No, we need irrefutable evidence of a larger conspiracy. We need to prove that Isabella was killed to cover up financial crimes, not just because of a love triangle." That was when they saw Natasha Volkov leaving the mansion in a black Mercedes, heading toward the city with the purposeful urgency of someone who had been summoned to an important meeting. "Follow her," Catherine said immediately. "Catherine, follow her, James. If Natasha is meeting with conspirators, if there are other people involved in covering up Isabella's murder, we need to know who they are." James started the engine, his police training warring with his growing feelings for a woman who was determined to pursue justice regardless of the personal cost. They followed Natasha through the winding roads of Marin County, across the Golden Gate Bridge, and into downtown San Francisco, where she parked outside an office building that housed some of the city's most prestigious law firms. "Morrison, Steele, and Associates," Catherine read from the directory. "That's Marcus's legal team. The firm that handled Isabella's will, the estate planning." She stopped mid-sentence as recognition dawned. "James, what if Marcus knew? What if he knew Natasha was going to kill Isabella? What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about the timing. Isabella called me 6 months ago about discovering financial irregularities. 3 months later, she's dead. And now, 3 days after we start investigating, Natasha is meeting with lawyers who specialize in covering up wealthy people's crimes." They watched through surveillance equipment as Natasha emerged from the building 90 minutes later, but she wasn't alone. With her was a man Catherine recognized from financial crime investigations, Viktor Kozlov, a money laundering specialist who had connections to organized crime and a reputation for making inconvenient people disappear. And behind him was someone who made Catherine's blood run cold. Marcus Carver himself. "He's not a grieving widower," Catherine whispered. "He's a co-conspirator." The revelation that Marcus had been working with Natasha all along changed everything about their investigation. They spent the next 48 hours building a case that exposed not just Isabella's murder, but the systematic financial crimes that had motivated it. Using Catherine's forensic accounting skills and James's police resources, they traced money flows that revealed the true scope of Marcus's empire. The charitable foundation was a front for an international money laundering operation. The tech company's research grants were actually payments to criminal organizations. The humanitarian projects Isabella had believed in were elaborate frauds that had stolen hundreds of millions of dollars from people who had donated to help sick children. And Isabella had been murdered not just to eliminate a witness, but to inherit her share of family money that Marcus needed to pay debts to very dangerous people. But as they prepared to present their evidence to federal authorities, disaster struck from an unexpected direction. Catherine's apartment was burglarized, but nothing was stolen except her backup drives, her printed evidence files, and her laptop containing months of investigative work. James's police access was suddenly revoked due to irregularities in his recent investigation requests. And both of their bank accounts were frozen pending investigation into suspicious financial activities that they had never engaged in. Marcus Carver was using his wealth and connections to systematically destroy their ability to pursue justice. "He's isolating us," James said as they met in a coffee shop 20 miles from the city, using burner phones and paying cash for everything. "Cutting off our resources, our credibility, our ability to present evidence." "Then we go public," Catherine replied. "We take what evidence we still have and broadcast it to everyone who will listen." "With what?" "Our backup drives are gone. Our files are gone. All we have left is the original Nanny cam footage, and Marcus's lawyers will claim it's fake." Catherine felt despair settling over her like a shroud. They had been so close to exposing the conspiracy that had killed Isabella. But Marcus's resources were simply too vast, his connections too deep, his ability to corrupt and control too powerful. That was when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "If you want justice for Isabella, meet me at Pier 39. Come alone. You have 1 hour." Catherine showed the message to James, whose expression immediately shifted to alarm. "Absolutely not. It's a trap. Marcus is luring you into a situation where you can be eliminated without witnesses. Or it's someone who knows about the conspiracy and wants to help. Catherine, please. I can't lose you too." The admission hung between them, raw, honest, vulnerable in a way that made Catherine understand that James Morrison's feelings for her had evolved far beyond professional partnership. "James," she said softly, "what if this is our only chance? What if someone inside Marcus's organization wants to expose the truth but can't risk doing it officially? Then I go with you." The message said to come alone. The message was sent by someone who either wants to help you or kill you. "I'm not letting you find out which one without backup." Catherine looked at James, this man who had risked his career, his safety, and his life to help her pursue justice for Isabella. This man who was looking at her now with an expression that made her realize their partnership had become something much more personal. "All right," she said finally, "but we do this carefully. And if it is a trap, if this goes wrong, it won't go wrong." James interrupted. "Because I won't let anything happen to you." The promise carried weight that had nothing to do with police protocol and everything to do with a man protecting someone he loved. If you think this story is ending with a simple meeting and easy resolution, you haven't been paying attention. What Catherine and James find at Pier 39 will expose the darkest secrets of Marcus Carver's empire and force them to choose between their safety and their souls. Asterisk, hit that subscribe button right now if you want to see how this ends, because what happens next will either save them or destroy them. Pier 39 at sunset was crowded with tourists, street performers, and families enjoying the San Francisco waterfront. The perfect place for a clandestine meeting or a very public murder. Catherine walked through the crowd, with James 20 feet behind her, both of them scanning for threats while trying to identify who had summoned them. The answer came from the last person Catherine expected to see. Dr. Sarah Martinez, Isabella's obstetrician, stepped out from behind a souvenir stand with an expression that mixed fear, guilt, and desperate determination. "Dr. Martinez?" Catherine approached cautiously. "You sent the message? I've been watching the news reports about your investigation, about the attempts to silence you." Sarah's voice was shaky but resolute. "I can't stay quiet anymore. Not when I know what really happened to Isabella." Catherine felt her pulse quicken. "What do you know?" Sarah looked around nervously, then pulled Catherine into a nearby restaurant where they could speak privately. 3 weeks before Isabella died, Marcus brought her to my office for what he said was a routine checkup. But Isabella seemed scared, nervous, like she didn't want to be there. What happened? Marcus insisted on being present for the examination, which was unusual. And when I was alone with Isabella for a moment, she slipped me a note. Sarah reached in her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She asked me to keep it safe, to give it to her sister if anything ever happened to her. Catherine unfolded the note with trembling hands. In Isabella's familiar handwriting were 5 words that changed everything. Marcus knows, I know everything. Beneath that, in smaller text, financial records hidden in baby's nursery. Tell Catherine to look behind the picture of mom. Catherine felt the world tilt around her as she realized what Isabella was telling her. Her sister had known she was going to die. She had known Marcus was involved, and she had hidden evidence that could destroy him completely. Dr. Martinez, why didn't you come forward with this before? Because Marcus Carver donated $5 million to the hospital where I work. Because his foundation funds my research. Because I was afraid that exposing him would destroy my career and prevent me from helping other patients. Sarah's voice broke with emotion. But watching you nearly get killed, watching this investigation get buried, knowing that Isabella died, trying to expose the truth, I can't live with staying silent anymore. Catherine felt pieces clicking into place. Not just about Isabella's murder, but about the larger conspiracy that had made it necessary. Dr. Martinez, I need you to do something that could put your life in danger. But it might be the only way to ensure justice for Isabella. What? I need you to help me get into the mansion, into the nursery, to find whatever evidence Isabella hid before she was murdered. Breaking into Marcus Carver's mansion turned out to be easier than expected because Marcus himself provided the opportunity. The next evening, he hosted a memorial service for Isabella at the mansion, a public display of grief designed to reinforce his image as a devoted widower while demonstrating to potential investigators that he had nothing to hide. Catherine and James attended as mourners, using fake identification James had procured through police contacts who were sympathetic to their cause. Dr. Martinez was there legitimately, representing the medical community that had worked with Isabella on charitable initiatives. While Marcus delivered a eulogy that painted Isabella as a beloved wife whose tragic death had left him devastated, Catherine slipped away from the crowd and made her way to the nursery that Isabella had been preparing for their daughter. The room was exactly as Isabella had left it, painted in soft yellows and greens, filled with furniture Marcus had ordered from the finest baby boutiques, decorated with the hope of parents preparing to welcome their first child. Behind a rocking chair was a framed photograph of Catherine and Isabella's mother, taken during a family vacation when they were children. Catherine carefully removed the frame and found exactly what Isabella had promised: a USB drive containing financial records that documented every aspect of Marcus's criminal empire. Bank statements showing payments to Natasha Volkov that predated Isabella's death by 6 months. Evidence that the murder had been planned, not spontaneous. Communications between Marcus and Viktor Kozlov discussing the Isabella problem and the need for a permanent solution. Wire transfer records proving that Marcus had been stealing charity money to pay debts to organized crime figures. And most damning of all, video recordings Isabella had secretly made of Marcus discussing his criminal activities with Natasha, including explicit planning for Isabella's murder disguised as an accident. Catherine was copying the files to her own device when she heard footsteps in the hallway outside the nursery. Marcus's voice approaching with deadly certainty. "Catherine Shun, I know you're in there, and I know exactly what you think you found." Catherine's heart stopped as she realized her investigation was about to become a confrontation that would either expose the truth or get her killed. Marcus appeared in the nursery doorway with Natasha beside him, both of them carrying the calm confidence of predators who had cornered their prey. The touching sister, Marcus said, his grief-stricken widower mask completely gone, replaced by cold calculation. Still trying to find meaning in Isabella's tragic accident. "It wasn't an accident," Catherine replied, clutching the USB drive that contained evidence of their crimes. "And you know it wasn't an accident because you planned it." Natasha laughed, a sound devoid of warmth or humanity. Isabella was a problem that needed solving. She was interfering in business that didn't concern her, asking questions about money that wasn't hers to question. Money stolen from charities. Money meant for dying children. Money that funded important business operations. Marcus corrected. Operations that generate far more value than whatever humanitarian nonsense Isabella believed in. Catherine felt rage building inside her. Rage at their casualness about murder, their contempt for Isabella's life, their complete lack of remorse about stealing from the most vulnerable people in society. You killed your own wife and child for money. I eliminated a security risk that threatened everything I've built, Marcus replied. Just like I'm about to eliminate you. That was when James Morrison stepped into the nursery behind them, his police weapon drawn and his federal backup flooding into the mansion. Marcus Carver, Natasha Volkov, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and fraud, James announced. The mansion is surrounded. Your security team has been neutralized, and every word you just said has been broadcast live to federal investigators. Catherine looked around the nursery, Isabella's sanctuary, the room where she had prepared to welcome her daughter, now the place where her killers would finally face justice. The USB drive contains everything, Catherine said, holding up the evidence Isabella had died protecting. Financial records, communications, video recordings of you planning her murder. Everything you thought you had buried is about to destroy you completely. Marcus and Natasha were handcuffed as federal agents read them their rights, their empire of corruption collapsing around them in real time. But as they were led away, Marcus turned back to Catherine with an expression that chilled her to the bone. You have no idea how many people you just made enemies of. This operation was bigger than you understand. The people who invested in our network will not forgive you for destroying it. Then they can join you in federal prison, Catherine replied. 6 months later, Catherine sat in the front row of a federal courtroom as a judge sentenced Marcus Carver to life in prison without the possibility of parole for conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and racketeering. Natasha Volkov received the same sentence for Isabella's murder, her performance as a grief-stricken witness completely dismantled by the nanny cam footage that Catherine had preserved. The charitable foundation's stolen money was recovered and distributed to legitimate organizations that would actually help sick children. Marcus's tech empire was dismantled, its assets sold to fund victim compensation and medical research. Viktor Kozlov and 12 other conspirators were convicted on related charges, their network of corruption completely exposed and destroyed. But the most satisfying moment came when Catherine established the Isabella Chun Carver Foundation for Financial Transparency, an organization dedicated to investigating charity fraud and protecting whistleblowers who risk their lives to expose corruption. James Morrison became the foundation's chief investigator after leaving the police department. Catherine served as its director after leaving the DA's office. And together, they built something that honored Isabella's memory while ensuring that her death would prevent others from suffering the same fate. Do you think she would be proud? James asked one evening as they reviewed applications for foundation grants, their work continuing the mission Isabella had died trying to complete. Catherine looked at the photograph of her sister that dominated their office wall. Isabella holding her mother's hand, both of them smiling with the joy of people who believed in the fundamental goodness of humanity. I think she would be proud that we didn't let her killers win. I think she would be proud that her death exposed corruption that was destroying thousands of lives. And I think she would be proud that we fell in love while fighting for justice. James reached across their shared desk and took Catherine's hand. I love you too, he said quietly. And I love that we've built something that ensures predators like Marcus Carver can't hide behind wealth and philanthropy while destroying innocent people. Catherine squeezed his hand, feeling Isabella's presence in the room like a blessing on the life she had built from the ashes of tragedy. Isabella died protecting evidence that saved countless children from having their charity money stolen. She died fighting for truth, for justice, for the belief that good people can overcome evil if they're willing to pay the price. She paused, looking at the foundation's mission statement written in Isabella's own words, recovered from her personal journal. The price of justice is eternal vigilance. The price of freedom is constant courage. And the price of love is the willingness to risk everything to protect what matters most. Outside their office window, the San Francisco skyline glittered with lights that represented millions of lives. Lives that were safer because Isabella Chin Carver had refused to stay silent about corruption, and because her sister had refused to let her murder go unpunished. The nanny cam that had recorded Natasha's crime was displayed in their office as a reminder that technology, when used properly, could serve justice rather than enabling evil. And every day, Catherine and James worked to ensure that Isabella's legacy lived on through investigations that exposed corruption, protected whistleblowers, and gave voice to people who had been silenced by powerful predators. The perfect crime had become perfect justice, and love had grown from the ashes of loss. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that ordinary people can expose extraordinary corruption when they refuse to accept injustice, hit that like button right now and share it with someone who needs to remember that heroes exist among us. Subscribe to this channel if you want more stories about people who fight back against impossible odds, because there are Catherine Chins and James Morrisons everywhere, working to protect the innocent and expose the guilty. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story of courage conquering corruption, love triumphing over evil, and technology serving justice instead of enabling crime. And remember, the woman who thought she had committed the perfect crime learned too late that in the digital age, everything is recorded, everything is evidence, and justice is cameras everywhere. Thank you for watching this story of sisterhood, sacrifice, and the power of truth to overcome even the most sophisticated evil. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Because sometimes the most important evidence comes from the most unexpected places, and sometimes love is forged in the pursuit of justice.